What's up guys? So in today's video we are going to get you straight into the first few basics that you need to know in order to navigate the astrology community and enhance your astrology knowledge per se. So we're going to talk about what are sun signs, we're going to talk about quadruplicities, dualities, and triplicities. And I know those names might sound a little bit confusing right now, but you probably heard about what I'm going to talk about before, you just didn't know the technical terms for them, which is why I'm going to break everything down for you, and it's going to be great. So welcome back to PlanetJayy, and let's get started. Okay guys, so we're gonna talk about sun signs. So if somebody asks you, hey, what's your sign, or they might even be asking you when you're born to try and figure out your sign, which is actually your sun sign. In astrology, like I talked about in the last video, we are earth-centric instead of like in regular astronomy when you hear about heliocentric, meaning everything's revolving around the sun. In astrology, everything is revolving around earth. So the only time that you hear the word earth in astrology is if they're talking about an earth element, as in Virgo, Taurus, Capricorn. You might also hear fire signs, water signs. Those are all elements involved in astrology, which you will learn about later in this video. But like I said, your sun sign is your primary sign. So if somebody's asking you when you're born and you say, oh, I was born on like, I don't know, September 23rd or something like that, you might say, oh, your sun sign is a Libra. So like in September, in early September, you are a Virgo. That's your sun sign. So now that you know technically what it is, now you're gonna know about the descriptive qualities that go around a sun sign. Basically, a sun sign is what you might hear like a broad stroke on an artist's canvas. It's not every single little detail about you, which might be incorporated in maybe your moon sign or your other houses, so on, so on, and so on. But your sun sign is just that broad stroke. People might tell you that sun sign is probably like the most important thing about you. For example, when you meet somebody and they ask you, oh, are you a Virgo? I don't want to be friends with you. Or, oh, are you a whatever? I don't want to be friends with you because I heard that blah, blah, blah. Anybody that does that to you, they might have a little bias on particular sun signs, but just know that in order to navigate the astrology community effectively, you need to understand that the sun sign is only a small portion of who you are. So don't just judge somebody based off of any one placement, particularly a sun sign, because like I said, it's a very broad concept, even though that's probably what you hear about the most in the astrology community based on a particular person. Alright, so the next group we're going to talk about are dualities. And dualities is basically when you split up the 12 signs all the way down to Pisces from Aries into two different groups. And those two different groups are going to be masculine and feminine signs. And I'm using quotation marks because this dualities term was brought into astrology in traditional astrology, and we know that in modern society we don't usually like to split people up based off how masculine or how feminine they are, because you know, like, who does that? It's 2019. We don't do that in 2019. But for the sake of understanding astrology, just in case you might come across this term, you know, later on when you're getting into the community and trying to learn different things, you want to know what you're hearing about. So dualities, masculine and feminine signs, and it's basically going to switch on and off from Aries all the way down to Pisces. So Aries is going to be a masculine sign, then you go to Taurus, which is feminine, and it's going to keep going, switching all the way down to Pisces, which will be a feminine sign. So we know how, like, in traditional society, masculine was somebody that was considered to be more assertive or more outgoing. That's not particularly what masculine means in astrology today. Masculine might just mean that you're more outwardly directed. For example, like in Aries, you know, Aries are kind of like zoom into something, whereas a Pisces might be a little bit more introverted in the way that they go about things. Not necessarily introverted in the sense where they don't want to do anything with any other people. It's just the way they go about things might be a little bit different. For example, you might say feminine sign is more self-contained compared to an Aries who may be getting their energy from other people. Or, you know, however way you want to put it. Just don't put it in traditional masculine and feminine, because that's not exactly what it means in astrology today. So now you know what dualities are. Now we're going to move on to triplicities. Triplicities are when you split the 12 signs into 4 different groups with 3 in each. I know that's a little bit confusing because usually when you hear the word 3, you'll think that there's 3 groups, but it's actually the reverse way. So there's going to be 4 groups, but 3 in each. And that'll go the same for quadruplicities too. But anyway, let's just stick with triplicities right now. Another word for triplicities is elements. So we know that there are 4 elements. You have fire, earth, water, and air. Those are the 4 groups, and there's 3 in each. So we're gonna just go through those really quickly. First one you have are fire signs, and that goes from Aries, Leo, all the way down to Guess it, Sagittarius. Fire signs are considered to be more enthusiastic or a little bit more active. You may interpret each of these elements in your own way just based off of the people that you meet or what you might read about signs and say, oh, maybe they're not enthusiastic, but they might be more outgoing. Or so like I said, everyone can have their own interpretation of what these things are. So next group we're going to go into are earth signs, and that starts with Taurus, it goes to Virgo, and then ends with Capricorn. So earth signs are considered to be more reserved or maybe a little bit more responsible. They are also called more practical or stable. When I say stable, I mean that those are the ones that might be labeled as the glue that keeps something together, and you can take that however way you will. Next sign we're gonna have, next group we're gonna go into are the air signs. So that starts with Gemini and it goes to Libra and then ends with Aquarius. Air signs are labeled to be more communicative and talkative and intellectual. A lot of these words I don't particularly think should be directly linked with these different element groups, because you can be intellectual and be an earth sign. You can be stable and be a fire sign. Like, I don't know, some of these terms you can just play around with a little bit and throw them around to whoever. For example, you might be able to say like, oh, the most stable fire sign is Leo, or it might be Aries to you, or Sagittarius. You can just take these terms and relate them to each other group if you want to. For example, like I've heard some people say like maybe like they'll take a sign and then put it into a different group. For example, they'll say like the Virgo of the fire signs is Leo. And so they'll say like Leo may be the most like analytical of the fire signs or whatever. Next group we're going to get into is the last group, which are water signs. So that's going to start with Cancer, it's going to go to Scorpio, and then finally at the end of the zodiac it's going to end with Pisces. Water signs are considered to be more emotional and more intuitive, but like I said, you can be intuitive and be a different element, or you can be emotional. I know a lot of emotional, for example, like air signs, or a lot of emotional fire signs. You know, it doesn't have to be particularly one thing, but that's just what you will generally hear. So now that we have gone over the dualities and the triplicities, we're gonna get into quadruplicities now. Alright guys, so the next group we're gonna get into are quadruplicities. So quadruplicities is gonna be 3 groups, 4 signs in each group. And quadruplicities just basically talk about how each sign interacts with the outside world. So you'll have 3 different groups. The first one's gonna be cardinal, the next one's gonna be fixed, and then the final one is gonna be mutable. And so basically there are different qualities that are associated with each group, and you might see this just from knowing people in different groups. Like you might say mutable Pisces acts this way, and that is the same way that maybe a Sagittarius might act, because they're also mutable signs. But anyways, let's just get into what each of those signs mean. So a cardinal sign, that is going to be involved with Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. So these signs are considered to be the initiators, you might say. They're labeled to be more outgoing, or the word that's in this book that I'm using, which is what I talked about last video, which is the only astrology book you ever need to know, is enterprising. So if you might know, like an Aries might be always the person in the group who's like, hey, let's go do this. Or you might hear a Libra say like, oh, I really want to start this new project. Or a Capricorn is like, I really need to get my work done, so I'm starting this shit now. Like, that's basically what they mean by that. Those are usually the initiators in the group or in this world, and that's how they interact with the outer world. So the next group you're going to have are the fixed signs. That's going to be Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and finally Aquarius. So fixed signs are labeled to be more stubborn, but the way that I think is a really good like word for that is stable, because those are the ones that those are the glue of the group. They're the things that maybe want to keep things the same, perhaps to a fault, but they also are the really good things. For example, if you have like a fixed sign parent, they might be the ones that you can always go back to, because you know that they're always going to be there for you. Those are the stable people, and those are the glue to your relationship, so on, whatever. The next quadruplicity that we're going to go over in the last of the 3 groups is mutable signs. So mutable signs are going to start with Gemini, then it's going to go down to Virgo, Sagittarius, and end finally with Pisces. So mutable signs are basically what you may call the malleable signs. Those are the ones that you can kind of have to be more flexible in a group. And like, let's say like you might have a cardinal sign that wants to start something new, right? And they'll be like, oh, hey, guys, let's go do this. And then the fixed sign's like, nah, I don't want to do that shit. The mutable sign is the person that you're going to want to talk to and be like, listen, I want you to be on my side, so that when we go through this vote about what we're going to do today, we do this because I have your vote. Like, that's basically how you might understand it. Mutable sign is somebody that you might be able to get to be more flexible in a situation. And those are really good because those are people that you might consider to be like maybe peer mediators or anything like that. They're very understanding, and they also are like kind of like go with the flow people to a certain extent. For example, you might have a mutable sign Virgo in your group, and your Virgo is like, nah, I don't want to do that shit, it's stupid. And you're like, I thought you were supposed to be a mutable sign. No, to a certain extent, they are flexible, okay? So that's the end of the quadruplicities, and this is the end of this video. So you guys, just a quick recap, we went over sun signs, the broad strokes, dualities, masculine and feminines, triplicities, which are the elements, and finally we went to quadruplicities, which are the cardinal, fixed, and mutable signs. So the next video is going to be on polar signs, which you might also hear as polarities or sister signs. So Aries sister sign is Libra, and then Taurus sister sign is Scorpio, so on and so on. So don't forget to like and subscribe and tune into the next video. Bye, and thank you for visiting Planet Jayy.